What's going on, guys? Today, I want to address something that I've been pondering for honestly a few years now. I want to address, and I feel like this is finally getting the attention it deserves. I've seen a few people mentioning this on other platforms and on YouTube. That what happened with StarCraft 2? Especially its story. What happened there? From a storytelling perspective, there is the first and second game are just on different levels. The first one surpasses the second one in every way. And I want to dive in depth on this and address it. But before we do that, let's talk about a few things that StarCraft 2 does get right. The gameplay is obviously very solid, very well balanced, and the game looks great. And I wasn't really around when the first game came out in '98, but I imagine that this second game, it looks just like how kids from the '90s imagined it when the graphics were what they were back then. Their imagination could kind of fill in the gaps, right? And seeing that just brought to life again was very, I imagine, very satisfying. Especially considering that there'd been a 12-year hiatus. But the game looked amazing when it came out. It still looks very good. It plays well. And I think a highlight of the Terran campaign in particular was that when it showed Kerrigan's betrayal reimagined for what occurred at New Gettysburg in the first game, that cinematic, even to this very day, is just phenomenal. The way it blends in the original dialogue from the very first game and then just puts it in a bone-chilling moment where we see things from Kerrigan's perspective. And I imagine any of the people that played the original game when they were playing the second game, just seeing that brought to life in a cinematic way, hence the name cinematic, right? I'm sure that must have been something to behold. And I do find it funny that the cinematic didn't show them fighting on those weird floating platforms. And though those platforms did make a slight reappearance in StarCraft 2, those weird platforms always felt out of place to me when I played the first game. But man, that cinematic is wonderful. It must have been a holy experience for the folks that were actually alive on the game when the original game came out in 1998. Revisiting the old locations that were presented in the first game, such as Ire and Char, and seeing them recrafted and reimagined for a new era of PCs where technology comes so much further, that was also really fun to see those things again, just redesigned and reimagined. It felt like a great callback to the original game. And then going along with similar lines, seeing Raynor and Manx and Zeratul actually in the flesh instead of just the TV screens that they were from the '90s. That was really cool to see. And I will say that Raynor feels just like he did back then in terms of his mannerisms and his demeanor. Regarding his actions as a character, we'll definitely address that soon. But Wings of Liberty, overall, the story presents itself fairly well. But honestly, that's about it for the positives. Right off the bat, from the first cutscene, there seems to be a disconnect from the previous game story. And I will reiterate this repeatedly. StarCraft 2 doesn't feel like a sequel. it feels like a cop-out or a reboot. For one, why are the Zerg dominating the Krapulu sector? Last I checked at the end of Brood War, Kerrigan was absolutely triumphant and had massacred all of her opponents. The Protoss and the United Earth Directorate and the Dominion, she had mopped the floor with them and said that she had declared victory over the broken bodies of her adversaries. But when we get to StarCraft 2, we find ourselves pretty much in the same situation we found in the first game, leading a rebellion against a dominating force. In the first game, it was against the Terran Confederacy, and now it's against the Terran Dominion. We find Raynor just fighting against Minsk. So that just leaves the question of why are we even in this situation? I thought the Zerg had absolutely triumphed. But no, I guess they're nowhere to be found. Are the writers trying to imply that as Kerrigan chased down the United Earth Directorate at the end of Brood War, that she went really far away from the Krapulu sector and it took her 5 years for them to return? I don't know. It's just a bit strange. It just seems so odd the way that we find ourselves leading a rebellion, then the Zerg show up again, and Raynor's talking with Matt, and he's all, we haven't seen the Zerg in years. And it's just, well, where the heck have they been? Shouldn't they be dominating the region? Again, there really seems to be a disconnect that if the Zerg are suddenly going to make an appearance and begin dominating through Dominion space and massacring billions of people, I mean, look, the cutscene right here.
What the hell happened? We ain't seen the Zerg in years. Why attack Marsara now?
It's not just Marsara. You need to see this.
Zerg Swarm launched a full-scale attack.
Devastation spread throughout all Outer Rim planets.
Sustained heavy losses.
Casualties in the billions.
Minutes ago, the Zerg attacked a Dominion military research facility.
Sweet Mother of Mercy.
New exclusive video footage confirms the Queen of Blades is in fact leading the swarm.
Knew she'd be back, but what's she after?
She's come to finish the job.
Kerrigan and the Zerg return and kill billions of Terrans in seemingly a day. Okay, wow. The scale, right? That is so many casualties. And well, why on earth does all this progress? Why do the Zerg make such strides, take so much territory, infest so many people, and the Protoss just sit back and let it happen? They don't do anything. It should be understood and well established from the first game that the Protoss, that their endless competition and mission is to contain the Zerg and prevent them from spreading. Have their beliefs changed in the last 5 years? Now they're just going to sit back and do nothing this time around? That really doesn't add up. Now we have the issue of, since when did Raynor have romantic
I'm going to make him pay.
feelings for Sarah? Okay, disregard. I know that I certainly got the vibe from the first game that Raynor liked Sarah Kerrigan, but were their feelings mutual? They really seemed to be more like comrades to me in the first game. And I figured that, you know, any feelings that Raynor had for her got thrown out the window when she betrayed and murked his pal Phoenix. He said, and I quote, "I'm the man that's gonna kill you one day."
I'll see you dead for this, Kerrigan. For Phoenix, and all the others who got caught between you and your mad quest for power.
Tough talk, Jimmy. But I don't think you have what it takes to be a killer.
It may not be tomorrow, darling. It may not even happen with an army at my back. But rest assured, I'm the man who's gonna kill you someday.
Well, it seems that all the alcohol he drank gave him amnesia, because now he wants to be with her, not kill her. And again, I do find it is a shame that the voice actress changed for Kerrigan. The voice actress, especially in Brood War, was just menacing. The voice actress for Kerrigan in StarCraft 2 is not bad by any means, but it's not quite the same. Hard to keep that same immersion. Kind of like Halo 2, when the Prophet of Truth, when his voice actor changed, it's not the same Prophet of Truth, not even close. I don't think this case is as drastic, but it feels similar. Anyhow, so we did these missions, and again, they lack a lot of the scale. They feel more like side quests. They don't have all the intense interactions between the Protoss and the Dominion and Rebel forces and things that were really present in the first game. And then we come to Zeratol's story, and this is where I take so much issue with the way that the writers took StarCraft as a whole. What's the famous quote, right? This isn't Warcraft in space. It's much more complicated or sophisticated.
This is not Warcraft in space. It's much more sophisticated. Liar!
Well, the way that the writers took this story with the addition of Amon and the Zelnaga and Kerrigan, this story, it devolves or it degenerates into simply Warcraft in space. And we have the whole issue with Zeratol in this mission reveals that the Overmind from the first game, he created Kerrigan not as a weapon, but to be the savior of mankind. And that is such a retcon. It lacks conviction. It almost feels as if it's trying to apologize for being too realistic and too dark and depressing. The narrative we got in the first game that was just very unforgiving and brutal. Now they're, actually the Overmind wasn't bad. He was trying to help people, and Kerrigan is actually good, guys. I promise she's good.
My children, the hour of our victory is at hand. For upon this world of Aya shall we incorporate the strongest known species into our fold. Then shall we be the greatest of creation's children. We shall be perfect. The Queen of Blades. Madness. Only she can free the Zerg from slavery, and in so doing, save all that is from the flame. This vision, I cannot bear it. Stop.
fine. Maybe a storyline on that idea, maybe that could have worked, but regardless, if you want to redeem Kerrigan, then these writers should have redeemed her at the end of StarCraft 2, in the last iteration of it, not in the beginning, not in the first release, not in the first expansion, not in Wings of Liberty. Oh, my goodness. Ultimately, if Wings of Liberty was a retcon, then Heart of the Swarm, from a storytelling perspective, is even more painful to experience. What on earth was the point of turning Kerrigan human again in Wings of Liberty if she just reverts right back to her Zerg form? I can't help but think that they got the campaigns mixed up. They got them out of order. Why on earth couldn't they just have maybe had the Zerg campaign be first? It doesn't add up. Also, side note, the Heart of the Swarm seemed to leave out something that was never fulfilled or completed, this one small side story arc. There's a mission, it was one of the more entertaining missions, but you play as a brood mother that consumes a Protoss ship, adding further biomass and taking over. Well, that mission ended with the Zerg seeming supreme and
The Protoss are no more.
waiting for further orders from Kerrigan, but they seem to have lost contact with her. And we never came back to that.
Can you hear me?
Ever. Unless I missed a bonus mission in Legacy of the Void or something. If I did, let me know in the comments.
I must say, I just find it so odd that they're trying to redeem Kerrigan within the same game where when you play as the Zerg, she does tons of terrible things. So not only are they trying to redeem her for all the crazy stuff she did during Brood War, but also all the horrible things she does in the game you just played. She straight up murked all these Protoss, sparing no one. And all of a sudden, oh yeah, we forgive you.
We do see this one moment in the Heart of the Swarm where they mention that Raynor swore in his anger he would kill the Queen of Blades. And Raynor also points out, hey, you murked my best friend Phoenix. So maybe the writers kind of noticed that they dropped the ball on that, but it's too little too late, guys. Phoenix is dead. He's been dead for 14 years by the time Heart of the Swarm came out, and I guess 5 years or so in the canon timeline.
What I had to.
Tell that to Phoenix. Tell it to the millions you butchered.
You swore you'd kill the Queen of Blades. You were the only one who ever believed in me. Do you still believe in me?
It just... Can they make up their mind on what direction they want to take this story in?
Never forget it.
My gosh.
We're done.
So, Kerrigan gets her revenge. Ostapasa to Manx. And she flies off to confront the Dark Lord Amon, who's on his way to destroy the Kroprulu sector.
Again, I just dare to question, how legitimate of a redemption arc can it be if she just got vengeance on Arcturus? She totally killed him mercilessly, and then lo and behold, now she's a saint. I don't think that's how redemption works, guys.
I don't know if I deserve redemption for what I've done, but our universe does. It is time to end this.
Amon and all of that with the Dark Xel'Naga is just so shallow. It's Warcraft 3 all over again, except it lacks any depth or any nuance. Warcraft 3 was amazing, and the story at that time worked because we hadn't really gotten a story like that in gaming by then, where factions put aside their differences and confront a common enemy. It's honestly pure gospel. Follow the prophet, unite as a people, put aside your differences, team up, and face the darkness. Well, it doesn't work in StarCraft. The joke that I mentioned earlier, right? StarCraft always prided itself on not being Warcraft in space. It's much more sophisticated. And now it's not. With the coming threat of Amon, Legacy of the Void is simply Warcraft in space. It's the exact same story, except instead of the Demon Legion, the Burning Legion, now it's just a Dark Xel'Naga and his vaguely, poorly established and fleshed out void capabilities. It feels way too over the top, way too fantastical, way too good versus evil, and so cliche and just reminiscent of Warcraft 3, but without the depth and without the sincerity. What was so fascinating about the original StarCraft is that there were no clear good guys or bad guys. There were just factions and interests. And that is very reflective of the world we live in today, of international politics and competition and interstate warfare. And StarCraft, for whatever reason, left all of that by the wayside.
We stand or fall together in this forsaken wasteland.
Going along with that, the concept of the Burning Legion and the demon presence, it just feels more natural in Warcraft because it's a fantasy setting. But StarCraft, being supposed to be sci-fi, it just doesn't have that merit or that... It doesn't feel grounded in this universe. It just feels completely out of place. For all of Legacy of the Void's faults with its story, I will say there are a few somewhat almost redeeming qualities about its presentation, especially in the very beginning.
I can hear.
When Amon uses the Kala to take over the Protoss, I enjoyed how that felt somewhat reminiscent of Order 66, and how the Protoss, much like the clone troopers, it's almost as if they have these their neural implants or nerve cords or whatever those things are called. They're almost like the inhibitor chips from the clone wars, and they need to be removed. I did think it was pretty dang unfortunate that Zeratul died like that. I was not expecting that. And I will say that was even though that hurt to see happen, it at least was done very well, and it felt pivotal to the story. I just wish that it were for in a greater context, fighting a foe that didn't feel so out of nowhere and out of place. And then there really was something great about seeing the way that Artanis and Raynor team up for that one mission. Just one. I don't know why we couldn't see them tag teaming. Why couldn't we play as maybe both of them and work much more closely with both characters teaming up? We did that all throughout the first game, and that was in the 90s. But no, instead, Artanis and Raynor are just together for one mission, and then Raynor's like, all right, peace. And we barely ever see him again. That one cinematic where they reflect on the aftermath of a great battle and shake hands as friends. Again, something about StarCraft 2 and its cinematics, that was great. It gives me chills every time I see it. The music is powerful, and I love the way that Artanis, since a handshake is a gesture that's foreign to him, he more or less awkwardly presents his hand, and Raynor reaches out and adjusts the grip. I really like that. It really goes to show their friendship. It's so... There's just something so heartwarming about it. And seeing the camaraderie. Seeing people put aside their differences and come together, right? But it just gives a snapshot into the potential of what Legacy of the Void could have been. What all of StarCraft 2 could have been if the story had been more memorable. They split ways, and then we just play as Artanis and his faction. They go around from place to place, and it's pretty boring. You find a robot version of Phoenix for nostalgia purposes, but it doesn't give anyone nostalgia. It just reminds us that homie got murked by Kerrigan, and she completely got away with it. Then we have the level design of Legacy of the Void, and it is almost the exact same setup for every mission. It's just destroying void crystals again and again and again. This insanely repetitive level design just points out the weakness in the storytelling and world building here. What are these void crystals? What are these void shards? What is a void thrasher? What on earth are these things? Maybe if I understood what they were, I would feel more invested in destroying them. But instead it's just wrecking crystals for the sake of wrecking crystals, and that's it. I also feel like the lore needs to be clarified tremendously if it's really gonna send it completely and try and do this whole Amon taking over and just the common trope of teaming up to fight the main foe that'll come to extinguish us all. How is Amon controlling the Protoss? They repeatedly reference the Kala. But is it really the Kala? My understanding is that the Protoss have the psychic link. And they're not a hive mind like the Zerg. So I just thought it odd that they can be controlled as if they are a hive mind once he suddenly gets a hold of the Kala or something. I mean, and how Artanis says they need to sever the nerve cords to be free from the Kala. And it's just something that needs to be better explained. What exactly is the Kala? Are they trying to kind of reference the way that in the first game that one Protoss faction was destroyed by the Zerg because they were too steeped in their ways and wouldn't see reason on Ire, and that's why Ire fell to the Zerg? I don't know. Ultimately, the storytelling is too vague, and the lore needs to be clarified tremendously. And it needs to occur in a way that's dynamic and interactive. And this really begs the question, if Amon can control the Protoss through their hair braids, then why do we even see the Protoss resisting him in the bonus Zeratul missions from Wings of Liberty? Is that because... I'm pretty sure the Dark Templars severed their nerve cords, but I don't think the other Protoss did in that mission. That feels like a fat contradiction in the lore. Talk about something that got overlooked. Also, what is the Void? Is it like the Warp from Warhammer 40,000? In Warhammer 40,000, the Warp is this method of space travel. I even think in the first game at one point, the first game of StarCraft, they call it the Warp. And what's interesting about Warhammer 40,000 is that, if I understand correctly, the Warp is also, in a sense, a reference to the gates of hell, or it's an opening to the forces of chaos. And a lot of people argue that Warhammer 40,000 is basically just fantasy in space. So it makes more sense for there to be the presence of demons and gods and these other factions that can be possessed and are bent on the destruction of life itself. That seems to feel more natural in the Warhammer 40,000 setting. And that's kind of what's happening with Amon in StarCraft, except that it feels out of place. As I mentioned, it makes sense for there to be a Burning Legion in Warcraft 3 because it's fantasy. It's more believable for there to be chaos and demons of the warp in Warhammer 40,000 because it's basically just Warhammer in space. StarCraft 1 felt more intriguing because it felt like the embodiment of Warhammer 40,000 lore done in an RTS setting without the fantastical elements. But introducing Amon and all that, it becomes beta Warhammer 40,000 and it becomes Warcraft in space. Then we have the, what is it called? Into the Void? The final DLC where Kerrigan sacrifices herself as what the Overmind foretold and tried to bring about forever ago. So Kerrigan becomes this golden, naked, winged goddess that can fly around. Whoop-de-doo! Now she can just fly about and deal damage. And yeah, the last mission where you fight Amon is, I don't know anyone that enjoys it. All you have to do is just build a bunch of mutalisks, fly naked Kerrigan around, and shoot these other crystals. More flipping void crystals, guys. They're everywhere in this campaign. And it seems that Kerrigan has to sacrifice herself. She gives her life. And Amon is cleansed from is it what? The universe? Just the galaxy or the Kaprulu sector? I don't know. And again, in the fashion of retcons, her sacrifice is undone. She just shows up later in human form to Raynor, and they head off into the sunset. It's about time.
You about ready to get out of here, cowboy?
Hell, it's about time.
Retcons after retcons after retcons. StarCraft 2 has no identity. It doesn't know what it wants to be. For the life of me, I can't understand why they didn't use the United Earth Directorate in this sequel. If they want to do the whole trope of uniting against a common foe, then why on earth not just use the UED? The United Earth Directorate was one of the most interesting developments and factions within the expansion Brood War. The idea that Earth was very, very far away, and this consolidation of factions united on Earth and decided to rein back in the Krapulu sector, which had been out of their control and out of their domain for gosh knows how long. And that this mere expedition of forces was able to lead all of the faction of StarCraft 1 to unite against them. And then seeing Kerrigan play them all as pawns in her game was fascinating. And think about that. That was just an expedition force from the UED. Imagine if they sent the whole might of their military to fight against the Krapulu sector. And while in Heart of the Swarm they do bring back Stukov, somehow he's alive. I have no idea how. Based on what the cutscene looked like in the 90s, he seemed to have completely exploded. But he's back and just has some Zerg arms and glowing eyes. It really is a shame that the most interesting faction from Brood War was just mentioned in one throwaway piece of dialogue that you'll easily miss if you don't click on everything between missions.
When I see the stars arrayed before me like this, I think of Earth. I remember its green hills.
You can't go home again.
I know. I have no place on Earth now.
I mean, I won't let you. Your return would be noticed by the government of Earth. They might consider another expedition to our little corner of space.
They will come back someday, you know.
I do, and I will be ready for them.
It would have been so much more interesting to have the UED make a new appearance, threaten the balance of the region, and then, okay, now we can have them team up. Let's have the Protoss, the Zerg, and the Terrans team up to fight a common foe, and this time it would feel much more grounded than them just fighting Amon. I really can't state this enough. I feel like they got the order of these campaigns mixed up. Turning Kerrigan human again could have really worked. It still feels a little out of place if Raynor said he would kill her back in Brood War. But there is something poetic and maybe even beautiful in seeing Raynor end the cycle of vengeance and forgive Kerrigan and turning her human again. That cinematic, seeing him carry her out of the depths of darkness within that Zerg hive cluster on Char, and the music playing that gorgeous rendition as the camera pans upward to what we see off in the cosmos, and it just gives that feeling of we've reached something new. We've reached peace and a new tomorrow. If that had been the conclusion of this game, that could have worked, and that I feel that could have easily been done. Why not have the game be all about fighting the UED, teaming up, and seeing Kerrigan earn her redemption, and then, in the last mission, turning her human again. Not only maybe more or less holding off against Kerrigan's forces and turning her human, what if it were something greater than that? What if her character was changing and actively asked to be fixed using the Zelnado artifact? I really think that would have had a lot more weight to it. So, to conclude, while the gameplay and graphic and cinematic components of StarCraft 2 really have a lot going for them, if the story is mid, the experience is mid. And the writing for StarCraft 2 lacks in every component. The overall experience is mid. It doesn't feel like a true sequel. It feels like a reboot or a retcon. And it really is a shame that this happened. I don't know what happened with the writers. But that is StarCraft 2's legacy. In truth, I guess it really is. There is a void there. Legacy of the Void might have been the perfect name for it. Because the storytelling is forgettable and does not leave a lasting impression on anyone